Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to recognize, again, Mr. Danos is not only a solid business owner in my district, but a constituent as well. For the record, it was my understanding that the gentleman from Massachusetts made a statement that the Deepwater Horizon accident was the largest oil spill in U.S. history. And that is not the case. The largest oil spill in U.S. history was in 1910. It was the Lakeview Gusher, which spilled twice the amount of oil that the Deepwater Horizon spilled. So I'd like to make sure we have that on the record. Also, the gentleman from Massachusetts continues to talk about safety. The Transportation and Infrastructure Committee has jurisdiction over the safety portion of the industry in the Gulf of Mexico. And what the gentleman fails to tell you is that he is after a liability issue. And so, Mr. Danos, you do a lot of work for shallow water drilling contractors and companies. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Could you tell me what would happen if they removed the liability cap on the shelf for those oil and gas companies? Because those oil and gas companies are small oil and gas companies. Is that not correct?
It's correct. My understanding that if the liability cap was removed, that there would be more wells shut in and shut down and less production in the shelf in the Gulf of Mexico.
Right. Okay. So it would basically destroy the shallow water drilling industry is what it would do.
It could.
It could. Okay. Thank you. Ms. Wogland, you're a big tourism advocate. I mean, you think that, and I agree with you. I like to travel. Particularly in Florida, I guess you would like to see the tourism industry grow. Is that correct?
I think we're simply stating that there are a multitude of economies in the Gulf that we need to be paying
attention. Right, but you would say tourism is an important industry. Is that correct?
Certainly, we think tourism and fishing.
Could you tell me what high energy prices do to tourism?
I'm concerned about...
well, no, that's not the question. The question is, it's pretty direct. I mean, you tell me what $5 gas does to tourism in Florida?
What I can tell you is that we cannot drill our way to lower gas prices.
Okay, well, can you tell me how we get tourists into Florida other than flying them in? Have they invented an electric plane yet?
What I can tell you is that the government's own figures show that gas prices are largely unrelated to domestic offshore oil production.
Oh, really? Okay, well, that's a supply and demand question. I'd love to have that argument with you. I'm going to run out a little bit of time, but I'd like to point out something else. Do you know, because last week we had a number of witnesses, and even I think Director Bromwich wasn't able to answer this for me, but do you know under what safety and environmental guidelines Petrobras drills? Do you know what they're required?
I'm not familiar with the specifics.
Because they're getting ready to drill in Cuba, right off the coast of Cuba. That's pretty close to Florida. So would you be concerned? You haven't looked up to see what they're going to be required, what requirements they're going to need to meet?
I wouldn't suggest that a lack of safety requirements in Cuba should suggest that we should have a lack of safety environmental review in the U.S.
Okay. And lastly, Dr. Mason, the economic situation in the Gulf of Mexico, would you consider that robust?
The economic losses in the Gulf of Mexico?
The situation economically in the Gulf of Mexico in regards to the oil and gas industry, right now, do we have a robust economy in the Gulf of Mexico?
We had a robust economy before the moratorium came along and shut it down unnecessarily during a recession. In fact, there was a great Wall Street Journal report reviewing Fed Beige Book evidence that showed that regions with strong manufacturing were largely insulated from the effects of the recession.
Okay, great. So it's not robust, but would you say that our domestic energy policy currently is a robust energy policy?
Our energy policy really is not sustainable. I see, going back to the analogy with the Space Shuttle Challenger, there was a very clear desire to launch another space shuttle after that. I don't see a clear desire to drill another well here. It seems like, if anything, there's a desire to shut down the entire industry. And that's why we're not only shutting it down with the Gulf moratorium, but trying to tax it out of existence with Section 199 and dual capacity, and then, of course, trying to keep the OCS shut down and scale it back further and further, which brings us back to rent seeking, which is crucial here. We're moving the regulator from a rent seeker from the private sector to a rent seeker from politicians. And in my opinion, I see a clear, very dangerous path in energy policy right now for rent seeking from wind developers, battery manufacturers, solar panel manufacturers, to get them in the pockets of politicians and regulators in the same way that the oil companies used to be. There are rents on the line here. Let's be very, very careful with policy moving forward so it can be economically meaningful.
Thank you so much. I yield back.